welcome back to Modern Education. I'm the host of Modern Education, Benjamin S. Woodford, here in the studio one more time with my co-host, Emily Quiles.
Hello.
I'm so happy to have you back again this week, Emily.
As
and
always.
You out there in the audience, we are happy to have you back as well. We're here every Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. for your commute. And here on Modern Education, we dive into all kinds of topics right here on the Stanford campus related to education. We broadcast underneath Memorial Auditorium in the KZSU studio. If you're finding us on the radio on 90.1 FM, you're probably sitting in traffic right now, and hopefully we'll make that commute a little bit better for you. If you're catching us online, we stream worldwide on kzsu.stanford.edu/live, and we always love to hear from our listeners from across the country or the world. We get listeners from all over, don't we?
We do, and it's always such a pleasure to hear from where our listeners are listening from. So please text into us at 855-723-9010.
That's right. And you can always hit us on the Twitter as well, at KZSU or at KZSU DJ, or find us on social media, Modern Education. You should be able to get to us from that. We're on the Twitter and the Instagrams and the Facebooks and all those things, whatever those things are, right?
Millennial platforms.
That's right. That's right. So, Emily, we are back in the studio today. It's pretty exciting. We have a whole panel of guests, not just one guest.
Room.
Yeah, definitely. And it is a hot day, so if you hear a dog panting in the background, that would be the studio dog here like usual with us, having a good conversation like every week, Friday from 3 to 4 p.m., right?
That's it.
So what are we going to talk about today, Emily?
Well, speaking of little puppies, doggies, we have three amazing guests today. We have Nan, who has her dog, Jasmine, has won the highest obedience award. We have her here. We also have Judy, who is a trainer at the Deep Peninsula Dog Training Club over in the Bay Area. And we also have Francesca, who's also a dog trainer. And we
The Gypsy Effect dog training, I believe, right? Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Well, amazing. And I'd like to welcome all of our guests on air. Welcome, guys.
Yeah, come on mic. We're really happy to have you here. Say hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of start by getting a little bit of like a couple minute background on how you got into the dog training circuit or the dog training discipline, or however you think of yourself being part of that. We'd really love to know a little bit about your background of how you started, kind of the genesis of your dog involvement. So who wants to jump in first and tell a little bit about how they first got started? Okay, Nan.
Hi. Well, I didn't actually want to get into this sport. My dog was actually left at our house, and the owner, my daughter's friend, never came to pick her up.
Wow, that is a way to adopt a dog, huh?
Yeah.
I watch friends' dogs all the time for the weekend. They always come back for them. I kind of assume they will, but
I was hoping.
Yeah.
As nightfall came, I was hoping. But anyhow, this little pit bull dog that I was afraid of because of its breed stayed with us, and I tried to place her. I called local shelters and rescue groups, and the shelter would take her, but the rescue groups wouldn't, and I really didn't want to send her to a shelter. So I tried to start training her and went to some classes locally, beginning obedience, and trained her so she'd be more adoptable.
Mm-hmm.
So you were just basically trying to make her palatable enough that someone would take her off your hands.
Yes, she did.
So why is she still with you? It seems like you may have fallen in love.
Yes, she definitely fell in love with the obedience competition sport and the dog and the breed and in general. And so that's how I got started.
That's so great. Now, I want to talk just for a second about pit bulls, because I know they have a bad rap in general. Sometimes I've met people who own pit bulls who call them an American Staffordshire Terrier, so they don't have to say pit bull because it's just such a stigma. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on if that's a justified thing or where this even comes from?
Gosh, I was on the other side where if I saw a pit bull walking down the street, I would cross the other road, and I didn't like them, maybe because of I perceived them as being the bad boy's dog, maybe,
Okay.
Just,
Yeah.
against the law, bad. I never had even met one until her.
So you were very clearly in the stigma side of thinking about what a pit bull is or capable of, right?
That was what I kind of learned, is that, they're all individuals, all dogs, all breeds. There's different types within the breed. And, just like people, you don't want to judge. And I was judging her based on her looks. And you don't
they're such beautiful dogs, aren't they? They're so powerful and strong. I think they used to call them nanny dogs because they were so good with children, which is a really funny thing now, thinking about that with all these bad rap around pit bulls. But I'm glad you came around. I had a pit bull once when I was a child, and it was such a good dog. This dog just loved me so much. It's unbelievable. So I do not believe in the stigma around the dogs. I generally would blame the owners. Similarly, actually, to bad kids, it's usually their parents I look to. Having been a teacher, I saw plenty of examples where I'm like, this kid's not doing well. And then I meet their parents and it's clear. I'd say it's very similar for dogs.
Well, it's actually, I believe it's a little bit of both.
Okay, yeah.
So I think you can get a stinker, a nasty dog and do all the right things and still have a bad dog. So, and you can take a really nice dog and probably, make it a nasty dog as well. So I think it's a little bit nature and nurture.
Well, it is difficult to get away from the DNA that is in the dogs. We bred them to have certain behaviors. And if you get enough generations of an aggressive dog, there's really hard to get that past that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Who wants to go next? How did you get
next
involved?
Introduction.
I'll go next.
Okay.
So I'm Francesca speaking, by the way.
No, thank you. Yeah.
I was a psychology student at Channel Islands University in Santa Barbara. I was doing this expedited program to get my bachelor degree. I was really interested in clinical psychology, behavior and all that. And then I got this puppy who kind of stole my heart. She came from a pretty weird background. I had a friend in college who found her at a house party. No one claimed her. She put her in her jacket and just took her home. She was not a very proper puppy owner. So she handed her off to me for a weekend to watch her, and I ended up just keeping her.
Yeah. It's a similar story, huh?
Yeah. I mean, my dad was like, I hope you understand the energy this dog has, because my dad is a total dog dude. And I was just like, yeah, Dad, okay, I get it. And I really didn't get it at all. So, I was one of those owners that definitely lacked socializing her. And I for sure created this very nervous, reactive dog. And a year in, she became aggressive. There was no way I was going to be able to find a new apartment in Santa Barbara, let alone this pit bull mix. So I stopped going to school and I moved back home because there was no way I could put her down or give her away. She had my heart. So
that's love right there. Huh?
That's love right there. It's what dogs will do to you.
Yeah.
And I dedicated my education to learning about animal behavior instead of human behavior. And this dog has really taught me a lot. So I'm definitely interested in the neurological aspect of training and retraining the brain, not just for humans, but for animals, both alike. And, the gypsy effect. I mean, my dog's name is Gypsy. She had a profound effect on my life. My other half, my partner, he's the one that came up with the name, and I was like, it's going to stay. So
oh, that's great.
It's an ever-growing business, but because of my dog, I'm here, and I'm happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. What a great story. It's amazing how much this chance meeting can transform your entire trajectory for both of you so far. And my dog story is probably very similar. These things just happen to you, and you're like, I can't fight love. It's right in front of me, right?
The puppy love.
Absolutely. How about Judy, you want to give us your story?
Well, my story's a little bit different. When I was born, my parents had a year-old collie, so I tell everybody I was imprinted on collies at birth. Unfortunately, that dog was hit and killed by a car when I was 6, and my parents said, no more dogs. I waited until my husband and I bought our first house, and the day we signed the papers, we brought home a collie puppy.
You were biding your time, but you had a plan.
So I took this dog to just a basic pet training class, and that was all I did with her at the time. And we, about 4 years later, got another collie, and I went through some more classes. And it was when we got our third collie, several years later, that I found obedience training locally under 2 AKC obedience trial judges, the Alvarezes, Rosalie and Pat Alvarez, living about a mile from where I live. A friend invited me to come and watch a class, and I did, and I could hardly wait to get enrolled because this was just the most exciting thing I had ever seen.
Do you remember what was exciting about it for you on that day, or what you were feeling?
These dogs were happy. They were retrieving. They were jumping. They were doing wonderful stuff, and I wanted to be part of the crowd. So here I am 10 dogs later.
Is that all?
And I've been teaching classes in competition obedience for the last almost 20 years, and trialing with my own dogs.
Wow. Okay. So
Wide variety on our panel.
right. Yeah. It's so much fun hearing about people's dogs because let's be real, we love dogs so much, especially here on the show. But I think Americans and maybe just people in general, what do they say? They say man's best friend. There's a reason for that. Yeah. Human's best friend. Agreed. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about obedience, just in the general sense of what obedience is, before we get into any like competition or how you're working with dogs to get them obedient. What does it even mean to talk about regular, straight up obedience? My understanding so far, and this is from my own time working with my dog, is it's basically like sit down, stay, heel, maybe some fetch or simple things like that. And that's like the beginning of obedience. What am I missing? What else is there?
Well, I refer people to the CBS program Lucky Dog, which is on Saturday mornings. Brandon McMillan is the show host, and he trains shelter dogs for families who have contacted him. And he has 7 different commands that all the dogs that leave him need to know. And it's come, sit, down, stay, off, heel, and no. And he feels every dog should know those commands, and by the time they leave him, they do. So that's obedience to me.
Okay. So that's pretty well in line with what I was thinking. You want to add anything to that, Nan?
No, I think Judy did a great job. Getting them to do what we want them to do and be happy and enjoy it.
Okay.
It's my goal.
And I think that's good for both the owner and the dog, right? If we're not enjoying ourselves, there's something going on here.
Yes.
Something that we don't want going on, because we would like to have fun with our dogs as well. I think that's the best part about having one. Yes. Emily, you look like you have something to say.
Oh, no, it's just my face.
Oh, yeah. She's got a good face. I like that face. Okay.
Impulse control is huge in obedience training. I think people look past the impulse control and the boundaries and strictly at like the commands. I think that, sit and down and stay and recall are all really important. But in context, if your dog can do them at home, doesn't mean they can do them outside of the home. So I think expanding the dog's generalization, making sure that they're not just listening to the commands at home. And so when you take those commands outside, it's a lot more of impulse control and teaching your dog to engage with you. So it's engagement. If your dog can't engage with you, training's going to be really hard. And then boundaries too. If you give your dog everything for free at home, there's going to be no boundaries, and obedience is going to be a lot harder. So there's a lot of leadership involved in obedience training as well. It's not just sit, oh, they didn't sit, or down, oh, they didn't down. It's, okay, let's see why they're not sitting or why they're not downing. And
like, what are the distractions? What is your mental state? That's one of the biggest things I found with training my own dog is my own mental state as I'm going into it makes such a difference, because that dog is tuned into everything I'm doing, right? And if I'm getting frustrated, she's like, I don't want to work for you now. So I'm like, okay, take a deep breath, get zen here. This is me that's making this hard, not the dog. The dog knows what to do. As soon as I change my attitude, she's like, all right, I'm good. Let's move, or whatever. And I think there's a huge piece of like personal development that gets overlooked a lot in your own emotional control and your own even emotional stability, because your dog is going to sense all of that every step of the way, right?
Right, and it can spiral down if you're having a bad day and train your dog and it's not going well. It's like, oh no, nobody wants to talk to me if it's a bad day.
Right, absolutely.
You really have to psych yourself up, and you really have to work hard at it. It's not easy.
Yeah, and I do think there's a certain level of like almost a meditative approach to your own mental state to work with a dog, because they're going to cue into every single thing you do. And just if I can take this back to the classroom a little, this is modern education.
It's so similar to a child.
It is so similar. And I think, students, they know where you're coming from, whether or not you're saying it. And if you're annoyed with them or feeling like some sort of disrespect or anything towards a human, they're going to know it, whether or not you're saying it. And I think the dogs are just sort of the amplification of that, because they have they don't have language. So they really rely so much on your facial expressions and your...
You have language.
Dog's language. Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Yeah.
Ben recently taught me is that your facial expressions really mean a lot when you're with your dog. So recently I've been using my facial expressions with my little puppy, and I could see it. Like, he really does react off of just the way that I'm looking at him. And to me, that's, massive. It's so big because you don't realize how you're
if you're loose and relaxed, your dog's going to be loose and relaxed. If you're stiff and you're tense, your dog's going to read you, and they're going to become stiff and tense, or they might become a little more protective of you because you're not comfortable in a situation. So dogs, one of the ways they communicate is if they encounter another dog that they're not a big fan of or that they don't want to interact with, they divert eye contact, they close their mouth, they stiffen up a little bit, their tail stops wagging, and they're showing all these signs to kind of let the other dog know, please don't come say hi to me, please just leave me alone. And so if you're simulating the same kind where you're standing stiff and your mouth is tight and you're kind of strained a little bit, your dog's going to be reading a lot of that, especially if you're attached by a leash.
And there's a saying, your feelings go down through the leash to the dog.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
It's like a phone cord.
Yes.
There's a recent study that confirmed that if you're stressed, your dog is stressed.
Absolutely, yeah. And I also remember reading a study where they were talking about how they scanned dogs and humans' brains and found that the act of touching your dog changed the mental processes going on inside your brain. Like, it was a very soothing thing, and all these bonding hormones are being released, and it's such a powerful thing for both human and animal, and it really is physiologically measured as being a thing. They are happy, they have emotions like us. It's really amazing.
They did. Ian Dunbar, actually, who's my boss for serious puppy and dog training, which was one of my other jobs, he didn't do the study, but he found the study where dogs were put in a brain imaging machine, and one owner would pet the dog and praise the dog and verbally give the dog feedback, good boy, good girl, with lots of calm petting. A part of the brain lit up. It was pretty large. And then the owner gave the dog a treat, and the same part of the brain lit up, but it wasn't as big. So imagine the combination of verbal praise, verbal feedback to your dog, plus a treat. Like, oh my gosh, you're going to make a huge marker in your dog's brain that they just did something really good, and they're going to want to keep doing that.
So I was always taught when I was working in dog training with my dog, is that you always want to rotate or alternate and kind of keep it unclear whether you're giving a treat or praise or verbal praise or like a pat on the head. That way the dog is always sort of guessing which one is going to come and they'll respond to any. Do we have any other tips like that as far as like how to really keep your dog engaged with you?
You make it like gambling, like a slot machine. You never, so the dog never knows when he's going to get it.
Right.
And I always try to praise first, and then the treat, and then sometimes praise and no treat. But
so you keep it the variation.
Yeah, keep them guessing, and that's hard too because as humans, we get in ruts where we kind of do the same thing. But you want to mix it up and. Make it fun and exciting for the dog so he doesn't know when.
So, Nan, you were telling me before that you have at least I thought you had some really interesting treats that you gave your dog. Can you tell our viewers some of these treats? I thought they were amazing.
Well, I like string cheese cut up. The bees don't like it, and they have the low fat. They love cheese, and I do sometimes I cut up Costco chicken. Bird and mix it with some kibble for treats, and they usually have to do something before they get their meals too, whether it's just a sit or a down. So I always have them.
Oh yeah, we have a very complicated feeding procedure. She has steps and layers of excitement that we build up to the food, and it's very fun. I can't tell anymore if my dog is making me do it or if I'm making her do it. I can't tell who gets anything out of it anymore. It's just like we get in those routines, right? Yeah. And now you have these little traditions and like rituals with your dog. Like, okay, before we're going to go out, we say this. And, I don't know. It's so much fun. I love dogs.
And I forgot cheese balls too. They love those little cheddar cheese balls.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Any other treat tricks that people do or?
Microwaved hot dog bits. Those are real winners.
You warm them up too. Wow. Everyone deserves a warm meal, right?
Well, they're not warm when I feed them, but they make wonderful treats.
Yeah.
Microwaving them takes some of the oil out of them and makes them nice, firm treats.
Okay.
To give.
Okay.
Liverwurst.
There you go.
Ice cream.
Anything out of the human fridge, really.
Really? Okay. My dog has never had human food in any form. It's always been. Yeah.
So I didn't know we actually could. So you can give your dog
in small amounts. You know?
I feed raw. My dogs eat what I eat, but I cook my meal.
What's nice with
training
is size doesn't matter. So the smaller the treats, the better, and then you can
give them more, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that works out.
It leaves them wanting more. So when you leave them wanting more, what are they going to do? They're going to engage and stare at you.
The person that taught me dog training said something along the lines of, a hungry dog is an obedient dog, so don't ever feel bad about letting them go a little hungry.
And that's what makes training a non-food oriented dog a challenge, because then you've got to come up with some other miracles to get
non-food oriented dogs. So that's to say that some dogs don't want food.
That's right.
Treats. I didn't know that existed.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Makes our job.
Is that with a certain breed per se? It just depends on the dog.
Just a general. Could happen to any breed.
See, I'm the opposite. I am a food-oriented human. Just put something in front of me, I'll do whatever you want. It's pretty sad, really. Especially ice cream and cheese balls and string cheese. I mean, these are all things that would definitely get me working as well.
Now I know what to do. You're feeling a little bit.
Oh no, my secret's out. She's going to definitely take advantage.
Cheese ball is in my back pocket.
Okay, so
nice. Just give him a little cheese ball. Just keep doing.
There you go. I'll keep working for hours. Okay, so let's talk about competition, right? I know, Nan, you've achieved the highest honor in dog obedience. Is that right?
Yes.
What is this? What is this award, or what is the title that you've achieved?
It's the coveted OCH, or Obedience Trial Championship Award. The AKC gives it. It's based on the dogs you beat. So depending on how many dogs you beat in competition, the bigger the class, the more points you acquire.
So did you get lucky and it was just a big class that year, or did you really just dominate? Tell us how it went down.
I didn't dominate. It was about a 4-year struggle, sometimes a point at a time and sometimes 10 points at a time, going mostly in California, but sometimes we go to Oregon, and you have to compete in the ring without food or toys.
Okay. And so give us an idea of what this looks like. I know we're on radio, so it has to be described. You can't wave your hands for us or anything. But what does it look like to actually go into the ring and compete?
It's scary.
Okay, that's what it feels like. That's fair, too.
About going down through the leash, the dog knows.
Uh-huh.
And, so there's a judge and a ring and jumps, and your dog has to do what you say, and hopefully in a happy manner. The happier they are, they get points, and they can't do it before you ask them. They have to do it when you ask them, and they have to smell your scent and pick it out of about 10 articles. An article, it can be leather, wood, or metal.
Okay.
And you rub your scent on it, and the dog finds it.
Okay, so nose work is part of it then.
Mm-hmm. So, yes,
okay,
yes.
All right.
And signals, and the shows are all over the United States. And
is this different than agility?
Yes.
Okay, how is it different?
Agility, I think for the dog might be more fun because it's running around. This is more, they have to be controlled more and not impulsive.
Is this on leash, off leash?
Off leash in the higher levels.
Okay.
You have to heel with the dog by your side without a leash, and it has to do hand signals from a far distance away, no verbal. And you have to do all. Judy knows a lot about the things to do.
In order to get to the level that Nan has achieved, you have to pass the first 3 levels, which are not easy. They're novice, open, and the highest one is utility. And the novice exercises are half done on leash and the other half off leash. When you get to the open exercises, this is where the dog begins to work away from the handler. So we now have jumps introduced. We've got a dumbbell retrieve that they need to do. And they will do hand signals with commands this time. This is kind of easing into the next level utility where you can't use verbal commands. The open exercises are all done off leash. When you get to the utility exercises, as Nan said, you've got to do scent discrimination, which is like nose work, and you've got you're working in a 40 by 50 foot ring, and you need to send your dog straight away from you to the opposite side of the ring, and then direct them to a jump on either side. And it looks easy. It's difficult.
I can't imagine that being easy.
Right. I trained my dog myself, and I always wish I had help because stuff like that is so hard to work just with one person. At least that has been my experience. Are you able to work that stuff alone in the beginning, or?
Yes. They say it takes 1,000 times to do the go out before they kind of get the picture of to run away from you and stop when you tell them.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool.
What does that look like in training then? So is it just, like you said, 1,000 times? Is it just, okay, let's do this over again? Okay,
no, never. If you do that, you will bore your dog to death.
Wear the dog out.
And he'll just say, you do it. I'm going off in a corner and lie down.
Right. My teacher always said, end on a good note every time, and always make sure whatever you're doing ends on a positive trial, and then just let it go. If it starts to get hard, stop right away as soon as you can get a good ending. Is that basically how you'd approach it?
And the good trainers know to stop before, when the dog's still wanting more, is when you stop.
Right.
Those are the good trainers.
Right. Try to catch it before you're trying to drag that last one out, right?
What are the signs that you can kind of pick up on?
Well, you want to try to get there before, just stop when your dog's having fun. You kind of get to learn to know maybe that's 5 minutes of work, maybe 10 minutes of work. You can't draw it. Several short periods of training is much better than one long hour period.
Right.
A few times during the day is great.
Okay.
Keeping it going, because you train every day, correct?
Yeah, you shouldn't do that, but I do.
Well, it has becomes a lifestyle at some point, right?
And they actually enjoy going out, and because I do it every day, I sometimes just go out and throw the ball for them. Like when they're supposed to run away from you on the go out, I'll say go place and then throw a ball. So I have to make it a lot more fun because we do it every day. And
right. Now I want to talk.
Nan's a master at that. Let me me tell you, she's really good at changing up the exercises and keeping the dog involved, because if you don't, you're not going to have any dog. You know, your
the more
dog
random, the better. You don't want to oversaturate training.
Yeah.
The dogs shouldn't even know they're training. Training should be a game to the dog. It should be fun. Their expression should be up. Their ears should be perked. Their tails should be perky and up, and they should be wiggly. They shouldn't look flat at all. If they do, then maybe end on a fun game, and then just give them a break and give yourself a break.
Right. And that's, I think, such a powerful thing, because you can't force your way through like being engaged and compliant and happy about something, right? There really needs to be a deliberate approach to thinking through making it fun, right?
And dogs, dogs learn by association. Humans learn by association. I think a lot of species learn by association. So if you have one thing that you're really trying to work on, whether it's competition or a behavior mod, and you're just drilling it because you want it to be good, because you're trying to be a good dog owner, your dog might start associating that whole session with that specific behavior you're working on as something negative. Mm-hmm. And so you're actually doing more harm than good. So you really want to make sure that you're relaxed, that you're having a good time, and your dog's relaxed and they're having a good time. And if it hits that wall, then just take a break and don't keep pushing it.
Which will probably end up showing in the competition, or if you're not competing at home. Mm-hmm. That's a good point to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I wanted to go back a little bit, because you were mentioning before about, Francesca was mentioning before about just the transferability and generalizability of working new behaviors. Mm-hmm. Now, in my experience, what we talked about in my training time around like grades, we'd say like first grade is like at home. It's really simple, easy, low distractions. And you work your way through like front yard or backyard, front yard, down the street, at the park with dogs. And that's like kind of sixth grade is kind of, you have gotten through elementary school. Now you actually have the behavior in like most contexts. Can we add anything to that? Or how do we progress from like in the living room at home working with a behavior to being in the arena or being in like a dog park or somewhere where it's a much more challenging environment?
You need to incorporate distractions in the early stages when the dog is in a comfortable environment before you ever throw a whole bunch of distractions at him.
In a new environment.
Yeah.
What are some distractions that you can give the dog?
Other dogs walking by with their handlers, squirrels running across the lawn, loud noises. So the dogs have to be comfortable and confident before you move on. And those of us who are training these exercises for the obedience ring really have a problem, because our dogs need to work off leash, but there are just so few locations out and about where we can take that leash off and work without animal control bothering us.
Right.
Yeah,
so what do you do? How do you approach that?
We sneak around.
Did you just say that on the air? Yeah, we've all done it. Right. Yeah.
Everyone has their secret spot where they do off-leash practice.
Right.
So Nan was telling me earlier that San Jose has a lot more open, or you can have your dog off the leash.
I think Mountain View actually has
View
some
as well? Okay.
off-leash parks. The only problem with going to like a dog park is I'm not a fan of dog parks, and I because you're working with your dog and you want those distractions controlled. You don't want an uncontrollable dog that you don't know.
Those dogs are all over in the dog parks.
You can work at home. You can go to friends' houses. And I work it all the time. A lot of it I do on leash. And there's I don't want to get in a flexi discussion, but you can do a lot on a flexi, and you kind of find a park where nobody's around. And
what's a flexi?
A flexi is a retractable leash.
It's just one of those really long ones. Yeah, right.
26 feet, where you can do recalls. You can do a lot of exercises on your flexi and still be abiding by the rules.
Mm-hmm. I'm not opposed to. I'm not a huge fan of flexis, but they're also good because the dog can't. One, they're not dragging a leash, so they don't feel that they have the leash on them, and they can go out about 20 feet, and the flexi kind of just goes with them, and it's not super obvious that they're on a leash to the dog.
Yeah, and that brings up a really good point around leash technique. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand how much nuance and technique there is within the way the handler is actually holding the leash. I mean, I know when I was trying to work some long distance stuff on a flexi, it's like I'm almost like flying a kite or something, trying to keep the flexi from getting caught on something or restricting the dog so that the dog isn't aware of it, and it's just sort of like trying to make it invisible. But there's so much more in just the slight nuances of how you hold the leash and how you put signals through the leash to the dog. And I think there's like some invisible stuff going on there. Anybody have any thoughts or comments they want to throw out around leash work and how to actually interact with your dog using a leash?
Well, the first thing I would say is I think all dog owners should have to have a license before they can use a retractable leash.
Okay.
Because unwittingly, a lot of dog owners go on walks and they allow their dog to go out to the end of the leash, and they're a danger to cars coming by. They're a danger to other passersby. Those of us who use a retractable leash in training know how to use it, and we're not using it around places where people can be injured or dogs can interfere. So a retractable leash is a special kind of leash for training, but I certainly don't advise the general pet owner to use one.
Right.
So with the general leash, what are some of the things when you first, let's say you first got your dog and you are starting to train them, what are some of the techniques that you can advise someone to use?
Well, one of the things that I do with a young puppy is to have a very light leash and let him drag it around the house to begin with, just so he gets to feel what it's like. I don't put any restraint on the leash to begin with. And then when we're ready to begin walking on a leash, I'll shorten up the leash so he doesn't have a lot of room to move around, and he learns to stay by my side. And as he gets better at that, I can let go some of the leash and give it a little more slack as he becomes more comfortable in that side position, because I don't want a dog out at the end of the leash anytime.
Right. You don't want a pulling dog, right? Yeah, right. Absolutely. Okay. Any other tips on leash work? Or
I would say put a lot of effort in keeping that leash loose, because so many parts of communication between dogs gets cut off with the leash. It's like dogs have ritualized greetings. They have ways that they naturally greet each other. And when they're on a leash and the leash is taut because they're pulling and they're sniffing and they haven't been taught how to walk politely on a leash, which is usually either on the left or the right, with a slack leash, which is like, the leash being loose. There are so many behaviors in their body language that don't get to be finished. I don't know if that makes sense.
Like, you can't go tight on the leash if it's already tight. So now you're just pulling back and you've lost like the feedback loop there.
And
right?
The dog's physical body changes when the leash is tight too. So an offensive dog looks like stiff and forward. Right. And when a friendly, happy dog that just wants to say hi is at the end of their leash pulling, their body is stiff and forward. So they look like an offensive dog to another dog. And that's where you get a lot of reactivity or reaction out of another person's dog who's always pretty friendly, and that's when you hear the human say, "Oh my God, I've never seen my dog do that before." And it's because the dog read the other dog's body language as offensive, when really you just wanted to greet him and say hi. So it's really important to put a lot of effort into keeping that leash loose, because it causes a lot of, the leash is an amazing tool. It's the law, and leashes are I'm conflicted with them because people don't know how to walk their dogs on the leash. And then you get zigzagging where dogs are leading the walk when the human should be leading the walk.
Who's walking who here, right?
Exactly.
The dog should not be in charge.
So what's the importance of basically showing that you are walking as opposed to the dog walking?
So when your dog is guiding the walk, your dog's in charge. They get to say hi to whoever, they get to bark at whoever, they get to cause ruckus, and you're just kind of following behind them. So it's really important for a human to take back control of the walk and not be alpha and not be dominant, but be a responsible and calm and confident leader.
Right. And I think that's such an important piece of, like, if you are trying to just dominate your dog, that is not the kind of relationship you're really trying to build with this animal that loves you to pieces, right? The point of it is to be strong and confident and assured that you are in charge. And once you take that stance within the pack or within the relationship with you and your animal, the animal wants that, right? They would prefer that you're the one calling the shots. They feel better when you're the one.
They do.
Yeah.
They want someone to follow. But if they don't have anyone to follow, or if they feel like their human isn't the leader, they're going to fill that leadership role. And that's when you get a lot of behavior problems like aggression or, just your dog being, my dog growls at me when I try and get them off the couch. It's like, why is your dog growling at you for being on the couch? So
yeah, it's like an insecurity when the dog doesn't have a strong leader. They start feeling like they need to run the pack and they need to be the one in charge. And then all of a sudden,
confidence. Yeah.
Right. It's a very insecure place for a dog.
Is that the alpha type of, is that under that category, or are we steering away from the alpha
I
dog?
Don't like to use alpha or being dominant on your dog. That just teaches your dog to be afraid of what's next from you if they don't listen or if they do something wrong. You want your dog to kind of look up at you and be like, what's next? Not like, what's next?
Benevolent leader.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah, that's great. And I think the alpha terminology is actually pretty well outdated and has been debunked as not even really being how pack mentalities work. It was kind of one of those early miscommunications that has propagated for so many years. We all still just treat it like common language. And so I think this is really great. We're bringing out that it's more about, clarity and calmness and reciprocity with your animal than it is about like being the dictator that just rules the nest, right? That's not really a healthy relationship in any.
And setting boundaries. That's really important.
Like, what are you thinking about when you say that?
Anything from charging out the front door if the door is open. Just have the rules of the house. Be consistent with them. There's nothing that's more upsetting to a dog or a human is when the picture changes from day to day.
Not knowing what to expect is confusing. Right. Yeah. I hate that too. And when people are, any kind of unstable environment is tough for us to deal with, right? And a dog is even, I'd say, more affected by that because they really live by their routines. They have expectations.
They're creatures of pattern, man.
So I live in a household of 5 people. It's my family. And basically with my little puppy is exactly that kind of mentality where everyone's on a different page. So like, how would you, if someone else listening was kind of feeling this struggle where a lot of people have different opinions about how to train the dog, how would you go about kind of establishing, because it seems like there's boundaries for the dog as well as the people that you're with. It goes both ways.
So you're asking, how do you get the family or the training unit on the same page?
Exactly.
You all go to class.
So everyone should go to class
Everybody
together.
goes.
Family.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was an easy answer.
Yeah.
Anything else we can add to that? I mean, about like consistency day to day after the classes.
Always.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Follow through. I think a big thing I see is you tell your dog to sit. You tell your dog to sit. You tell your dog to sit. They don't sit. Human gives up. Dog learns to blow off human.
Right.
Dog learns human doesn't follow through, so why should I?
Right.
So consistency and follow through is huge. I mean, same with kids and students.
Sure.
Like, you really understand, they start looking at you like, okay, I'm just going to sit because they're going to make sure that I sit anyway. And that's when you start getting quicker responses, is when you follow through, because your dog starts to learn human follows through. The quicker I sit, the quicker I get treat, and the quicker I get released.
Yeah. It's funny. My dog basically was only trained by me, and every other person that tries to handle her, she just tests them immediately. She's like, are you going to follow through? Do you have the guts to handle me? And most people don't, and then she's in charge. But if someone will actually stand up to her and be like, hey, I'm the human, you're the dog, you're going to listen. She's like, okay. I'm on whatever you say. I know how to do it. I just didn't think you actually would follow through. And it's so funny seeing every single person. She's like, I'm going to test you. I'm going to test you. I'm going to test you. Are you smart enough and strong enough to handle me?
And her testiness becomes stronger and stronger and more reinforced because she usually wins.
Right. Yeah, I'm the only one that can actually make her listen, or like, not me. Like, there's other people who can handle her, but in general, most people don't have the dog training acuity to actually be able to handle what she's testing. They're like, oh, she's in charge. Great, moving on, right?
So I'd like to
that brings up another aspect of dog ownership. The family or the owner who gets a dog and doesn't have the time for training. So now they send the dog away to be trained. And
to be trained, I'm doing air quotes because it's really, you're the one that needs to be trained, right?
Well, the owner misses out a lot by doing this. The bonding, the fun association you have with your animal. But at the same time, the dog misses out too, because now the dog has learned to respond to a stranger, and the dog comes home. The owner doesn't know exactly how to follow through on the training the dog has had. I had an acquaintance recently who sent her dog out for just such training. This was a 10-week-old puppy, and the dog came home.
Why would you even be worried about that much training at 10 weeks? I mean, the dog's bare.
Training begins the moment you bring a dog home.
Okay.
The dog is learning whether you're training it or not, so you want it to learn the right things. Okay, all right. But this particular puppy, I feel so badly about it, because she came home very shy and nervous, and it turns out she had been trained on an electric collar.
Oh, at 10 weeks?
Oh my gosh.
So I have something to say about e-collar training. So for everyone out there listening, if your dog doesn't have a foundation, if you have not conditioned your dog with treats and praise and reward-based training, your dog has no idea what default behavior to fall into after it's been corrected. Right. So I've used e-collar training. I'm not a huge fan. Pretty sure I traumatized my own dog because I was just desperate to find anything to help with her aggression. So I've been on the, quote, balanced trainer's side, and it kicked me over to the positive reinforcement side very strongly. And I'll only use an e-collar with a client if the client can get injured from their own dog because their own dog's too strong. The only time I'll use a prong or an e-collar is when I feel like the dog is physically too strong for the handler. Right. But I will not put an e-collar on a dog until there's a good 8 to 10 months of positive reinforcement training first, because your dog needs to learn what exactly they're supposed to do. Your dog needs to know heel means, okay, come around and come to the left side of my human. If your dog doesn't know what heel is, how are you going to correct it for not heeling? If your dog doesn't know how to downstay, how are you going to correct it for not staying down? So they need a really strong positive foundation of all those behaviors before you should even think of correcting a behavior. You need that bond, you need that leadership, and even when you do use correction-based training, it should not be a stranger correcting your dog. It should be you, the person that it has the strongest bond with.
Right, and I think the same probably holds for, like you mentioned, prong collars, but even choke collars or head collars or all these different ways of working on the leash with your dog. Is if you don't understand how to communicate using that tool, it's not an effective tool. You're just choking your dog, and it's not an effective way to communicate it. It can be an effective piece of training if you know what you're doing and you've worked with the dog. And, you know, I mean, like one analogy I think of is when they're training elephants for the circus, right? They take the baby elephant, it is a sad situation, but it's an analogy, I think, that helps make sense of this idea of when the baby elephant is tiny, they'll put a huge stake in the ground and a gigantic chain, and then the elephant learns it cannot get away. And then the classic thing is the grown elephant, which could take down the whole tent if it wanted to, has a little tiny stake in the ground with like a string holding it, and it doesn't fight you, right? And it's the idea of if you get a small puppy that you know is going to be a 200-pound dog, you start working it early and you teach it where it fits into the pack and how to interact with you while it's small enough that it can actually learn to respond. That way, a 100-pound woman can handle a 200-pound dog that has been brought to understand where it fits in that pack. We have any thoughts on just any of that, leash training or taking that step early on?
I think you could be a dog trainer.
He's very good.
I have taught a few people to start on their journey of being dog trainers, but I do not have time for it myself.
We were on the park once, and there was this dog that was afraid of wheels. And so he actively worked with this dog to kind of train out of that. It was really interesting.
Bit me. That dog bit me. It was a hard case, but by the end of like 15 minutes with this dog, it was in love with me. It was just laying on the ground, showing me its belly. And it was like a very, very aggressive dog, actually. But it was kind of fun, too. I'm like, a little bite, but like, this was fun. I just taught this dog a new thing. I mean, it was kind of fun, but yeah.
So I'd like to talk about crates. So how can a crate be used, in what instance, and how should we go about using a crate with our dogs?
Oh, gosh.
Are you the expert, Nan? the crate training expert?
Ideally, you want to make the crate a fun place, like a den.
Okay.
It's natural. Dogs like dens. You don't want to make it punishment. It's a nice place because you can put them there and they won't get into trouble. Some people think it's punishment, but it shouldn't be, and it's not. It's a safe place for them. While I'm here, my dog, my foster failure dog, is actually in a crate, and I know that when I'm going to come home, she's not going to have ripped up any of my shoes or.
That's the problem at my house. Yeah.
So and ideally you want to have them in the crate when you drive. Secured, so you can drive properly. But it's such a great tool. Right now, it's like you said about the elephant. My dogs are in a tent, and they can easily get out. But there's that light tent that I pop up. They stay in it. So
right.
It's a great tool.
Yeah, and when I've seen dogs that are crate trained well, they love their crate. They go in there when they're bored or something's happening. They're like, I'm going to go hide in my crate for a minute. This is the safest place. And my understanding of that is dogs in the wild, they'll dig a hole or make a little like dog cave, and that's so they can stay cool during the hot parts of the day. And I think that the crate is almost like a simulation of that instinct, right? I know my dog on a hot day will go find like a bush somewhere and hide under it and dig a little hole and then lay in it. And it's like, I always wondered why, because she'd like dig on her bed in the house. I'm like, why is she digging on her bed? And I saw her outside, like digging a little hole and laying in it. And I'm like, oh, she's just trying to stay cool. It's her instinct.
Now you know.
Yeah. They cannot fight those instincts, no matter how much.
I think sometimes like the misconception with the crates in general, like you're putting them in a cage, right?
If you're going to housebreak a puppy, you have to use a crate.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're going to be mopping up after your pup.
Say 50% of training is managing the dog's environment, managing the puppy's environment. And if there's no crate and there's no X-pen or there's no blocked off safe space for your puppy, you're not managing the environment, and that's when their little brains just kind of run amok.
Right. And then they try to manage everything for themselves, right? Yeah. So we are amazingly just about out of time. This era went by so fast. I would love to hear if you have like one last thing that is like a pet peeve you wish people really knew, or some words of wisdom that you wish you would have known sooner, or a little bit of words of encouragement, anything that you feel is like that last thing that you have to get out there before we get off the air here.
Mine is not to judge me by my looks or my breed of dog, and get to know the dog, and because they're all different.
Yeah, so don't discriminate against pit bulls or people, and just let us be judged by our merit. Wow, that is so much bigger than dog training and beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. How about you, Judy?
Well, I guess for me, it would be just because your dog does something right a couple of times, it doesn't mean that he's trained and he's always going to be right. You need to keep reinforcing the positive behavior that you want. That helps the other things go away.
Right, and I think that is one of those misconceptions, is like that you get your dog trained and then they're done and now they're trained and that's good. I mean, I know even seeing eye dogs go in for training tune-ups like every 6 months, right? And, I think it's a never-ending process, and it's really great to just bring up that there is no finish line. Just like for us, we're never a finished product until we're dead, and then there's no point and there's nothing left to finish. But other than that, it is always a process of growth and learning and reinforcement of the behaviors you want for yourself and for your dog, and that's beautiful. Thank you so much. Francesca, last tip or words to give the audience?
So, I started my own business, The Gypsy Effect, and it's actually taught me more than I think I've taught anyone.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing that people need to keep in mind is to try not to praise and reinforce anxious behavior. And anxious behavior can look like a really excited, happy dog. So you always want to reinforce calm.
Right.
Reinforce calm praise, soft petting, any type of like really fast petting is going to excite your dog. Any type of high pitch, like excitable talking is going to excite your dog. And excitement is the cousin of anxiety. So reinforce calm, praise calm, pay attention to your dogs when they're being boring and when they're sleeping and when they're just kind of chilling out. And, I think that's the biggest thing.
That's such a good tip. I've seen so many dog owners have their dog go crazy and they pick it up and start cuddling it. And I'm like, that's the wrong thing to do. Stop doing that. Yeah. You're literally telling your dog, keep being crazy every single time you do that. So it's such a simple but clear, actionable step. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And to all three of you, thank you for coming on the show. We have just sat down talking about dogs and dog training with our three wonderful guests. And this is Modern Education. We are here every Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. We're on your commute home here in the KZSU studio, and we're streaming online as well. We hope you'll come back each week as we tackle a new topic around education or learning. And in this case, this was the dog education episode. We really love doing this because we love dogs on the show. So thank you for tuning in, and we will be back next week.